Before time was measured by ticking clocks, it lived in firelight, stars, and stories whispered beneath ancient skies. Welcome to Sleepless Lantern, where history glows quietly in the dark. In this story, how did people count the days before calendars? We'll drift across ages and empires, from sunlit temples in Egypt to the bone-carved moons of Ice Age Europe, from the constellations of Tamalakam to the dreaming skies of Australia. If your eyes are growing heavy, let them rest. You don't have to stay awake. Just listen and breathe. These aren't just stories. They're soft echoes of how people once lived by the sun, the stars, and the turning of the earth, long before anyone flipped through numbered pages. So, settle in. And if you genuinely enjoy stories like this, quiet, historical, sleep-friendly, consider subscribing. Your support helps keep the lantern glowing and the past gently alive. Chapter 1. Son of a Karnak. Egypt's light on stone. Location: Ancient Thebes, Egypt. Circa 1400 BCE. The air was warm with the scent of sand and stone, touched by the faint sweetness of lotus drifting in from the river. At dawn, the city of Thebes held its breath. In the east, the sun rose slowly over the Nile, gilding the horizon with its ancient promise, not just of morning, but of rhythm, of order, of time. Within the sprawling temple complex of Karnak, time itself was carved into sandstone. The priests stirred in their white robes, quiet in their movements as birds rustled in the palm shadows. They did not need clocks. They had the sun. And they had the temple, aligned so precisely that its very stones whispered the hour. At the heart of Karnak stood the great hypostyle hall, a forest of stone columns, each as wide as the reach of 4 outstretched arms. Light moved slowly through the hall, filtered and deliberate. The builders had known the sun's path like a friend's footsteps. They had designed the temple so that, on certain days, the morning light would strike the altar just so, a narrow beam threading between stone giants, illuminating offerings of incense and bread. To the Egyptians, this was not simply architecture. This was not the harmony of the universe. To live in balance, to track the movements of heaven, was to live rightly. And so they built, not only temples, but calendars etched in stone. Along the walls, carved figures walked in silent procession, holding scepters and ankhs. Beside them, rows of stars and crescents told the sacred tale of time. The lunar months, the rising of Sirius, the flooding of the Nile. They watched the river as they watched the sky. When Sirius, Subdet, rose before the sun, it marked the beginning of the Egyptian New Year. This celestial moment came just before the inundation of the Nile, when the river would spill its life-giving waters onto the fields. The sky, the land, and the people moved in concert. Even the pharaoh, god-king of the 2 lands, followed these signs. His festivals were timed to the stars. His rule was made sacred by the alignment of heavens and earth. In the quiet courtyards, scribes recorded the flow of days. They used papyrus scrolls, painting marks with black and red ink. A circle for the sun, a crescent for the moon, a pattern of stars for the constellations. It was not only priests who watched the sky. Farmers, midwives, fishermen, all knew the importance of timing. When to plant, when to reap, when to set sail or say goodbye. There was a calendar of 360 days, with 5 added at the end. Feast days outside time, days of myth and birth and celebration. Days when the gods walked close. And so the year turned. But before there were scrolls, before even the first carved date, there was the temple. And before the temple, there was the sun, rising golden and slow across the desert, casting long shadows through stone doorways built to frame its journey. The sun had always risen, the people had always watched, and the temple had learned to remember. Its columns stood like sentinels, its walls gathered centuries of light, and each morning, as the golden beam touched the inner sanctum, time was renewed, not in hours, but in illumination. Even now, if you stand there at the right moment. When the sky is clear and the hour is true, you will see the light return to that sacred place. You will see what they saw. A day beginning not with noise, but with silence. Not with hurry, but with awe. Time, in Karnak, was not counted. It was witnessed. It was welcomed. It was written in sunlight, on stone. Chapter 2. The moonbone of Ice Age Europe. Somewhere near the banks of the Dordogne River, 18,000 years ago. The stars above were cold and sharp, strewn like broken shell over the black velvet of the sky. Somewhere in the darkness a wolf called, its voice curling through the trees like smoke. But inside the low mammoth hide shelter, warmth lived. A woman knelt beside the hearth, coaxing flame from ember. Her breath was white in the air, mingling with the scent of damp fir, firewood, and the tang of old snow. Tonight was not a night of hunting, nor carving, nor listening to the elders speak of spirits and storms. Tonight was a night of counting. She unwrapped a precious bone from a roll of fur, long smoothed by handling and etched with delicate, careful mark. To the untrained eye, it might have seemed like a scratched piece of ivory, but to her people, it was memory itself. This was the moonbone, a tool, a record, a lifeline. The bone had once belonged to a reindeer, its marrow long ago eaten in the depths of winter, but now it bore 29 notches, etched with a stone blade, each one placed with patience and precision. Some notches were deep and wide, others faint and shallow. A rhythm written in silence. They marked the waxing and waning of the moon, the tides of darkness and light that ruled the cycles of hunt and hunger, birth and return. The woman was young, but she had been chosen as keeper of the time bone. It was her task to mark each new crescent, to watch the sky and record the days until fullness returned. The moon was no mere ornament in her world, it was a guide. The Ice Age Earth did not have clocks or calendars, but it had light and pattern and story. Outside, the snow gave a soft hiss, falling from the heavy boughs of pine. Her son stirred beneath the firs, small hands reaching for the warmth of her lap. She drew him close and whispered in the old language, the one of breath and root and fire. Tonight, the moon is thinning, she said. Soon it will disappear, and then grow strong again. When it is round like your eyes, we will journey to the cliffs for ibex. Do you remember? He nodded, sleep heavy. The bone rested beside them, its surface pale in the fire's glow. Each mark carried not just time, but memory. This was the 211th moon she had counted. Her grandmother had counted many more, and before her, others. Names now lost, but known through their hands and their eyes. The moon bone was not unique. In other shelters, in other valleys, other families carved their own. Some used antler, others soft stone, or even wood, though that rarely survived. The pattern always returned, a cycle of 28 or 29. The lunation, the breath of time. This way of counting gave rhythm to their lives. The full moon might mark the time for leaving winter caves and walking to summer camps. The dark moon might bring fasting or prayer. It was known when the reindeer would rut, when the rivers would swell with meltwater, when to prepare for the long night. But it was not only practical. Sometimes, in the flicker of firelight, the woman believed she could feel the past whisper through the bone, not just the marks, but the meaning. These were stories told without words, a quiet weaving of sky and hand. She had once asked her grandmother if the moon ever grew tired of being counted. "The moon does not count," the old woman had said. "She remembers. It is we who forget." Now the flame danced low, and the woman lay back, her eyes drifting upward toward the smoke hole, where the stars still glinted coldly. Somewhere up there, beyond the clouds and frost, the moon hung. A sliver tonight, just a breath of silver on the edge of black. But it would grow. It always grew. That was its promise. And with it, so would the marks. A new notch tomorrow. A step forward. Thousands of years later, the moonbone would be found again. In a cave, half buried in sediment, a curved piece of antler, with deliberate scratches. Archaeologists would call it the Ashango bone, or the Blanchard bone, or perhaps assign it to no name at all, only a date, 18,000 BCE. They would speculate about what the marks meant, lunar calendars, tally sticks, proto-mathematics. But they would not know the warmth of the cave, the hush of snow outside, the way the marks were whispered before sleep. They would not know that it was not just time being counted, but life. Back then, the world was ruled by ice and shadow. But still, people watched the sky. Still, they marked the days. Still, they passed the bone from hand to hand, not to measure time, but to carry it. As the fire faded and the shelter grew still, the woman placed the bone beside her once more. Tomorrow, she would carve the 212th notch, and the moon high above would carry on, silent, ancient, watching. Chapter 3. Stars over the Eastern Ghats. Ancient Tamil time. Location: Tamilakam, southern India, 300 BCE. The wind had a rhythm that night, warm and soft as a whisper against the coconut palms that lined the rice paddies of ancient Tamilakam. Far above, the stars scattered across the sky, like fine jasmine blossoms tossed by a celestial hand. Each one gleamed in a constellation that farmers, poets, and sailors alike had known for generations. Beneath that sky, a village stirred gently in the dark, and time flowed not in hours, but in stories, stars, and steps. An old man named Pari sat under the veranda of his home, his body still, but his eyes bright. The moonlight silvered his white beard as he waited for the right moment. In his lap lay a palm leaf scroll, the ends curling like sleeping vines. He was the village Kalafti, a timekeeper, not by sundial or shadow, but by sky and song. Children had gathered in a crescent before him, arms around knees, eyes wide. They had come not for play, but for learning, though they would never call it that. The lesson was in the listening. A girl in a saffron tunic asked the question that opened each night. "Thatha, when is it now?" And Pari, voice soft as tamarind leaves in wind, replied, "It is Tiruvonam, the star of Vishnu, rising in the east, and it is the third day since the new moon, the Valapirai. It is the time of planting the thin rice." The Tamil calendar of old was not a scroll pinned to walls, nor a device strapped to the wrist. It lived in the sky, moved with the phases of the moon, and the path of the sun, and pulsed within the culture like a drumbeat. 12 lunar months formed the year, each named for the dominant nakshatra, or star, seen on the full moon night. Time was not counted. It was sensed. Every star had a temperament. Rohini was gentle and fruitful, good for marriages and beginnings. Critica, sharp and hot, better for battle or fire. Farmers timed sowing not just by the monsoon, but by these celestial moods. Each moon phase whispered when to fast, when to feast, when to give, and when to rest. In the marketplace, a woman with silver bangles bartered for spices, her mind attentive not just to the weight of cumin, but the day's tithe, the lunar alignment. If it was an auspicious one, she might buy an extra bundle of turmeric, for that was a good omen for her daughter's upcoming marriage. At the temple nearby, a priest struck a bronze bell at sunrise, not by mechanical clock, but by the moment when the eastern sky turned the pale gold of ripening mangoes, a sign that the Sanchia Kalam, the sacred transitional hour, had begun. Tamil timekeeping was a weaving of astronomy, ritual, and poetry. It required the eyes to see not just light, but timing, the ears to hear not just sound, but sequence. The epic poets, the Sangam bards, composed verses that echoed with time's cadence. One ancient poem read, 1. The millet ripens under Ataran's gaze, when the peacock cries and the sky turns flame. Andaniya, the land and stars worked in harmony, and the people moved to that rhythm. It was not a precise system by modern reckoning, but it was deeply human. One did not need to measure time exactly, only to know its mood, its flow, its intention. Pari now gestured upward, his finger tracing the curve of the Saptarishi, the 7 sages that twinkled quietly above. That one, he said, tells us the time for the king's journey. If it sits low in the north after sunset, he must begin travel within 10 days. The children nodded. They had heard this before, but each time it entered them deeper, like the scent of neem that clings to cloth after many nights. Nearby, an old water clock rested on the temple step, unused but honored. A simple device, a bowl with a small hole, floating in a basin. When it sank, a measure of time had passed. But even this, the people said, could not compete with the eye of a watchful child or the ear of a mindful grandmother. In this world, time was not a tyrant. It was a guest. It arrived with a scent of jasmine, left with the hush of dusk. It bent itself to the needs of people, festivals, harvests, and dreams. That night, as the stories ended, Pari leaned back and looked at the sky. The stars have walked enough, he said. Let them rest, and let us follow. And so, under the ancient rhythm of the heavens, one by one, the children drifted off into sleep, guided not by numbers, but by stars. Their world would wake with birdsong and turmeric light, and time once again would begin not with a clock's chime, but with the quiet breath of a sky that remembered. Chapter 4. The Dreaming Sky. Australia's songline time. Location: Australia, out on the red earth, where the soil crumbles like ochre dust between calloused fingers. The stars begin to turn. The sky stretches wide and breathes in silence. It is night, and it is time. Not time as counted in hours or days, but time as remembered, sung, and walked. In this place, time is not a line. It is a circle. It is a story. A warm wind drifts across the grasses of the outback, carrying the scent of eucalyptus and stone. Somewhere, unseen but known, an elder sits by a fire. The flames crackle low, licking the edges of the dream. Children listen, cross-legged and still, as the voice of the land begins to speak through her. Before the world was like it is, she begins. The ancestors walked the earth. Their feet shaped the rivers. Their hands carved the mountains. Their voices became the sky. Her words are soft, but vivid. In the minds of those gathered, hills unroll like sleeping serpents. and stars blink like ancient eyes. They do not need drawings. The story is the map. It has always been. In Aboriginal Australia, time was not measured by sun or moon in the way outsiders might expect. Instead, the land was a vast memory, a living archive. The sky above, the rocks below, and every tree in between held stories. These were not just tales. They were calendars, compasses, and clocks. They were called songlines. A songline was a path, sung, not drawn, that could stretch for hundreds of miles. It might tell of a kangaroo ancestor who danced across a plain, or a spirit who burrowed beneath red cliffs to make waterholes. Each verse of the song matched a landmark. Each beat of rhythm recalled a turn in the trail. To walk the songline was to walk the story. To know it was to never be lost. Beneath the deepening night, the firelight flickers across ochre-painted skin. A young boy listens, his brow creased in thought. He asks the question that always comes. But how did they remember all of it? The elder smiles gently. You don't remember it all at once, she says. You learn it like breath. You hear it again and again. And then one day you're walking, and you realize your feet already know the way. The child nods, unconvinced but willing. The stories go on. They tell of the 7 sisters, pursued forever by a star hunter who never catches them. They speak of the emu in the sky, not made of stars, but of the dark places between them. A reminder that absence, too, can hold meaning. The sky becomes a storybook overhead, and the land a chorus beneath it. Each clan had its own portion of the song. Elders held the knowledge, but children were taught from early on. Not in a school, but in rhythm, movement, repetition. A clapstick beat here, a step there, a word only sung after one had seen the right hill or felt the right wind. And the songs weren't just for finding places. They marked when to move for the seasons, when to gather yams, when the bush plum ripened, when the turtles laid eggs, or when it was time to leave a place to rest. Every event folded into the melody. The dreaming, or Jukurpa, or Alkaringa, depending on the language group, was not the past. It was a timeless now. It was ongoing. It was always. The fire burns low now. Smoke curls like song into the heavens. The children are drowsy, eyes half closed but ears wide open. The elder's voice hums like wind in hollow stone. One day, this fire will be yours to tend, she says. The song will be yours to carry. You don't need to rush. Just listen, just walk. She traces a line in the dirt with her finger, a symbol that could mean water, or a journey, or the passing of time. No one asks. They know that meaning comes when you're ready to see it. Above, the sky turns. The emu drifts, its long neck stretching across the Milky Way. The stories hold it in place. In the world outside this one, people came to measure time with gears and paper. They carved calendars from logic. But here, in the dreaming, time remains folded into the land. It is spoken, walked, sung. It echoes through stone and seed. It lingers in starlight. And for those who still remember, who still walk quietly beneath that wide and ancient sky, the days do not pass. They hum, they glide, they sing. Chapter 5. Bells of the Hour. Time in Medieval Europe. Location: Europe, 1400. The mist hangs low in the valley, soft and cold as breath. Smoke curls from thatched rooftops, winding its way into a grey sky, and the fields beyond lie in quiet wait beneath frost-licked leaves. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls. Once, twice, 3 times. The sound rings through the morning like a summons, low and hollow. as if the day itself is awakening. In a small monastery tucked between woods and stream, a monk draws open the wooden shutters of the scriptorium. He listens. The bell marks the hour of prime, the first prayer of the working day. He dips a quill into ink and begins again the same lines he wrote yesterday and the day before. Outside, in the village below, time also begins to move. But no one has a clock. No one wears a watch. And still, every person knows it is time to begin. In medieval Europe, time did not live in numbers. There were no digital displays or minute-by-minute appointments. Instead, time was experienced through rhythm. The rhythm of prayer, of work, of weather, of feast and fast. It was marked by sound, by sun, by scent and bloom. The calendar was not a page. It was the church tower, the garden, the body. The monasteries led the way. Within stone walls, monks followed the liturgy of the hours, a sequence of prayers offered at specific times throughout the day and night. These included matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, and compline. Each came with its own chants, duties, and sacred pause. It was a cycle, not a schedule. A bell might be rung from a tower, struck by hand or rope, calling the brothers to rise from their beds in cold candlelight. Even at night, time moved forward with gentle discipline. A brother might carry a clepsydra, a water clock, or judge the passage of hours by the dripping of wax. In the village beyond, time was felt differently. People rose with light, worked with warmth, and slept with darkness. The crowing of the rooster signaled dawn. The tilt of the sun over a chapel roof told you how close to midday you'd come. And the chiming of church bells carried over field and forest, reminders of the sacred rhythm being kept even by those who could not read it. A woman in a wattle and daub cottage reaches for her broom. She doesn't need to look at a dial to know it is late morning. She can feel it in the sun on her shoulder and the smell of bread on the air. The nearby abbey has just rung terce, and her feet move in time. Her hands shape dough for supper, while her children sort beans at the table. Time here is in action, in repetition. A life built on tasks, each anchored to something older than the day itself. The seasons carried their own memory. Spring was for lambing, planting, and first warmth. Summer was haymaking and berry-staining fingers. Autumn meant the turn of leaves and carts heavy with grain. Winter was darkness, candle-making, and storytelling by hearth. The church calendar wove through it all, with saints' days, feast days, fasting days, and holy days of obligation. The year unfolded like a tapestry hung on a barn wall, heavy with tradition, full of familiar thread. People marked the length of days by experience. They knew when the sun no longer touched the edge of the south wall, it was nearing midwinter. They knew when the gooseberries ripened, it would soon be St. Swithin's Day. No chart needed. The memory of the land was inherited. And then, slowly, things began to change. In cathedral towns, mechanical clocks were rising. Massive iron wheels and gears ticked in towers, powered by falling stones or wound weights. These early machines didn't tell the minutes or seconds, just the hour, often marked by a ringing bell or a carved figure that moved when time struck. For many villagers, it was the first time time itself became something measured, and not just felt, but still, even then, the old rhythm lived on. A boy stands at the edge of a cloister wall, listening. He watches the monk light candles and place a sand-filled hourglass beside his tools. It will take exactly 1 hour to drain, enough to finish illuminating the sacred letters on today's page. The boy doesn't know what the hourglass is called, but he knows what it means. When the sand runs out, It will be time to eat. Medieval time was not rushed. It moved in rituals, not reminders. It was passed down by gesture, not alarms. It gathered in the bells that echoed across cold stone chapels. It shimmered in the golden thread of woven church banners. It drifted in the scent of herbs, drying above a hearth. Time was not always clear, but it was always present. It asked you to listen. So when the bell next tolls, in field or town, in abbey or hill, it does not call only the monks. It calls all who are part of its world. It invites you to pause, to remember, to begin again. The sound fades gently into the air, and the day moves on, not by ticking hands, but by breath, bloom, and bell. Chapter 6. Between the Stars and the Sea. Polynesia's sailing time. Location: Polynesia. The ocean doesn't keep time the way land does. There are no clocks on the waves, no shadows cast against stone walls, only the wind, the tide, and the stars. Always the stars. A canoe slices through the moonlit Pacific. Its twin hulls ride steady between wave crests, carrying a crew of quiet voyagers who know their path not by compass, but by memory. One kneels in the stern, eyes raised to the sky. He hums a chant low in his throat, sensing his breath to the motion of the sea. Above him, the stars are coming into place. He does not wonder where he is. He knows, because the sky is his map, and the ocean sings back to those who listen. Across the sweeping span of the Pacific Ocean, the seafaring peoples of Polynesia track time and place in a way both intimate and vast. They did not write their knowledge on paper. It lived in the body, in chants, in rhythms, in stories sung beneath the stars. Time was not divided into hours or minutes. It moved in cycles of tides, in the turnings of the moon, in the flight of birds, in the flowering of breadfruit, and always in the constellations that rose and fell above the sea. These wayfinders, Tamotu and Tufuga, knew how to navigate across thousands of kilometers of open water. From Hawaii to Aotearoa, from Rapa Nui to Tahiti, they sailed without sextants or metal instruments. They counted the days by the arc of the sun, but they counted the journey by the rhythm of the world. On a warm island morning, a teacher draws lines in sand with a stick, instructing a child. The lines represent swell patterns, long sweeping curves of ocean movement. He places shells in the sand to mark islands. He presses his palm to the earth and moves it with the imagined rocking of a canoe. This, he says, is the rising of Kalupokawelo. He gestures skyward to a cluster of stars. When these return, the voyage begins. Polynesian navigators recognized star paths, or kavinga. These were constellations that appeared in predictable patterns and angles at certain times of the year. Each island had its own star compass, and the navigator memorized the arc of every rising, from the Southern Cross to the Pleiades. By night, the stars told time. By day, it was the sun, the wind, and the shape of the clouds. They knew how to read the color of water, how dark meant depth, how light signaled a reef. They felt the motion of the canoe on different swells and recognized patterns that spoke of land just beyond the horizon. They listened for the calls of birds. Certain species would only venture so far from shore. Every part of the natural world marked a moment. Every moment belonged to a cycle, and every cycle had a chant. In the darkness before dawn, a navigator stirs from rest and stands at the bow. The ocean rolls beneath, vast and unreadable to most, but to him it is legible. The stars overhead are shifting, He notes how Altair has just risen. That means they have entered the next phase of the journey, and they will reach land in less than 5 sleeps if the winds remain steady. He doesn't mark the time with numbers. He marks it with certainty. He closes his eyes and sings. On land, time was also kept through the rhythms of life. The cycle of fishing, planting, and gathering was tied to the lunar phases. The first quarter moon might signal a good time for setting nets. The new moon meant night travel. The full moon was a time of ritual. Festivals followed seasonal migrations. Children were taught the signs of planting time by elders who pointed to the return of a bird or the first scent of a tree's bloom. This was time without clocks, but not without structure. Each moment had its season. Each season had its song. Later, the boy who studied the shells in the sand begins his own chant. His grandfather listens. The words are not perfect, but the tone is true. And in that moment, a lineage is passed. Not with a signature or a date, but with breath, sound, and the shape of a hand tracing the sky. The waves continue their gentle roll. The stars blink and glide, and the days move forward, not by ticking, but by sailing, by singing, by watching the sky turn and knowing what it means. Chapter 7: Serpent Shadows and Sacred Cycles. Time among the Maya. Location: Mesoamerica. The jungle breathes slowly, thick with green and heat and hush. The air around the temples is still, as if the world is waiting. Then, a cry. The long call of a howler monkey, echoing through stone. And as the sun begins to rise, it casts its first light across a wide ceremonial stair, touching the carved head of a serpent. It is the equinox, and the shadows begin to move. As the hours pass, they slither along the steps in perfect rhythm, forming the body of the feathered serpent god, Kukulkan. Not by chance, by design. This is time, not only counted, but summoned. To the ancient Maya, time was sacred. It was not linear. It spiraled. It breathed. It danced between the heavens and the underworld. Every star's return, every planet's path, every shadow's stretch was part of a divine calendar designed to echo the rhythms of gods, ancestors, and the earth itself. They built entire cities, like Chichen Itza, Tikal, and Copan, to align with these rhythms. Time lived in the stones. In their world, there wasn't just one calendar. There were 3. The Tzolk'in, a 260-day sacred cycle, was used to name days for rituals and ceremonies. The Hab, a 365-day solar calendar, tracked the agricultural year. And the Long Count, a vast system stretching across centuries, counted the days since the mythical creation of the world. Each day had a number, a name, a deity, and a purpose. To the Maya, every moment in time was alive. On a stela carved from limestone, the scribes recorded, "This happened during 9.1, 222 is 16, 12 Kib, 20 Yakskin, under the reign of Lord Shield Jaguar." To modern eyes, it may look like a puzzle, but to the Maya, it was a precise record of history, divinity, and cosmology, all at once. The date marked the moment in eternity. The name gave it breath. The glyphs told its soul. Timekeeping required skywatching. Astronomer priests, or A.J. Kinnob, climbed observatories and charted the heavens. They tracked the cycles of Venus, which reappeared every 584 days. A star so significant that wars were sometimes timed with its rise. They built structures like El Caracol, a round observatory in Yucatan, where the windowed dome was cut to watch celestial events. the sun's position at solstice and equinox, the movements of the moon and Mars, all were studied and stored in memory, then stone. And when the right moment came, ceremonies began, offerings were made, dances performed, fires lit, until Niadasian, not because the clock struck noon, but because the world had turned in just the right way. A priest holds a codex in one hand, a folded bark paper book filled with red and black glyphs, and lifts his eyes to the sky. He sees the first glint of Venus returning in the east, just before dawn. He nods. Tomorrow, a new cycle begins. But time was not only about the heavens. It was also in corn, in rain, in birth and death. The Maya watched the crops, when the first shoots rose from the milpa fields, when the rains began to fall, when the animals called in chorus through the humid night. These were signs, markers. They whispered the nearness of feast, of planting, of festival. Each household had a hearth, 3 stones for the 3 stars in Orion's belt, and families passed on when to sow, when to call the rain gods, when to rest. Children learned time not from watches, but from the cycle of story, harvest, and star. In the heart of the city, at Chichen Itza, people gather. They stand still as the sun sets and the shadow of the pyramid's corner aligns perfectly, the serpent's body appearing again along the steps. It happens only twice each year, and always it draws breath, for in this moment the world is not random. It is precise. It is beautiful. It is remembered. To the Maya, time was not something to control. It was something to honor. So they built temples not for shelter, but for sunlight. They carved dates not for record keeping, but for meaning. They passed down time in myth, in math, in mortar. Now, if you listen gently, you might hear the hush of the jungle again, the low pulse of drums from far away, the slow hiss of shadows slithering over stone, and you will know the day has passed, not by ticking, but by serpent, sun, and cycle. Chapter 8. Before the calendar, the world that watched together. Before the tick, before the talk, before watches clasped our wrists, or months were boxed in grids, the world kept time another way, not by numbers, but by noticing. In every corner of the world, people once listened carefully to the turning of the earth. They watched the sun, noted the moon, counted footsteps, stars, and seasons. They waited for snow melt, followed bird calls, marked the day a flower opened. And in those signs, they found rhythm. Not precise like seconds, but steady as breath, from the temple shadows of Egypt to the carved bones in Ice Age Europe, from the starlit fields of ancient Tamilakam to the sun skies of Australia, from monastery bells in medieval Europe to Polynesian canoes under constellations, to Maya temples built for sunlight's return. Each people looked up, or down, or inward, and they understood. Time is not owned. It is shared. It is felt. Some counted by moons, some by fish tides, some by how long it took to boil rice, or walk to the edge of a field, or tell a certain story aloud. A fire was lit at dawn. A prayer was whispered at dusk. A drumbeat welcomed the solstice. A grandmother said, "This happens when the mangoes ripen." And that was time enough. These weren't just measurements. They were moments woven into life. Felt by body, held by memory, passed by mouth, and gesture, and glance. Even now, in the quiet corners of the world, someone still knows these ways. A farmer watches the light turn golden and knows it's nearly planting time. A shepherd sees the stars drift above the hill and knows when to move. A fisher listens to the moon's pull on the tide and waits. Time before calendars was not chaotic. It was collaborative. It moved with the wind, with the growth of a tree, with the pace of a child's footsteps, or the migration of a shadow across a stone wall. It was made not to control, but to accompany. And perhaps in some quiet way, we still long for that, to be in rhythm again, to notice the world, not only through alarms and schedules, but through signs, a breeze shifting in the afternoon, a color in the sky, the moment your own breath slows without being told. So, if you've ever paused to watch a sunrise, felt the hush of twilight, or remembered something only when the scent of rain returned, then you've known this kind of time too. It still lives, not in clocks, but in you. The world once counted days with the sky, with the soil, with the song of birds and the language of wind. And even now, if we listen, we might hear that rhythm return. And so, across temples and tides, bone and starlight, time passed, not in numbers, but in breath. Thank you for drifting through history with Sleepless Lantern. If tonight's story helped you rest, or if something in it stayed with you, know that you're always welcome to return. There are many more quiet stories waiting in the glow. And if you genuinely enjoy this kind of calm historical storytelling, consider subscribing. It helps us keep this lantern lit. For you, and for anyone who needs a peaceful place to listen. Until next time, sleep softly, and let the past keep watch.